I know everything about you, about what you've been doing with my boss. You have 1 hour to pack your things.
Nothing says romance like a 3-hour drive to a cabin with no cell service, my wife humming along to Taylor Swift while our 9-year-old daughter stares out the window like she's heading to her own execution. I'm Evan Parker, and after 15 years of marriage to Victoria, I should have learned to read the signs. But hey, I'm just a construction guy who got lucky. What do I know about the subtle art of matrimonial warfare? Isn't this exciting, honey? Vicky chirped from the passenger seat, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her phone screen. Just like old times at Mom and Dad's cabin. Old times. Right. Back when we were young and stupid enough to think love conquered all, before I built Parker Construction into a multi-million-dollar company, and before my wife decided that my CEO, Trent McAllister, was more interesting than the guy who signed his paychecks. Wait, did I just think that? I glanced in the rearview mirror at Ellie, who was unusually quiet. My daughter inherited my dark hair and Vicky's sharp green eyes, but she got something else entirely, a BS detector that could rival a polygraph machine. She was fidgeting with something in her lap, shooting me worried looks every few minutes. Dad, she said suddenly, can we stop at that gas station? I really need to use the bathroom. Vicky sighed dramatically. We just left an hour ago, Ellie. Can't you wait? No, Mom, it's an emergency. I caught Ellie's eyes in the mirror. There was something urgent there, something that made my stomach clench. Sure, kiddo, I could use some coffee anyway. The Sunoco station looked like every other rural pit stop. Flickering neon signs, a few pickup trucks, and the kind of coffee that could strip paint. I pulled up to the pump and Ellie practically launched herself out of the car. I'll take her in, I told Vicky, who was already back to scrolling through her phone. Inside the station, Ellie grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the back corner, near the beef jerky display. Her face was pale, and she kept glancing toward the door. Dad, I need to show you something, but you have to promise not to get mad. My blood went cold. What is it, sweetheart? She pulled out a phone, not her regular kid-friendly device, but a sleek iPhone I'd never seen before. I found this in Mom's purse yesterday when I was looking for gum. I wasn't trying to spy, I swear, but it kept buzzing and the screen lit up and I saw... She handed me the phone, and my world tilted sideways. The text thread was between V and T-Mac, Trent's nickname around the office. But these weren't business messages. These were explicit, detailed, and left absolutely nothing to the imagination. Photos, plans for secret meetings, and worst of all, discussions about handling Evan and the divorce settlement. My hands shook as I scrolled through weeks of messages. They'd been planning this for months. The anniversary trip, the cabin, all of it was a setup. Vicky was planning to serve me divorce papers in the most humiliating way possible, probably with Trent waiting in the wings to console her. Dad, are you okay? I looked down at my daughter's worried face and forced myself to breathe. How long have you known? Just since yesterday. I wanted to tell you before we left, but Mom was always around and I didn't know how. Tears welled up in her eyes. I'm sorry, Dad. I should have said something sooner. I knelt down and pulled her into a hug. You did nothing wrong, kiddo. Nothing at all. You're the bravest kid I know. My mind was already racing, calculating possibilities. I took photos of the most damning messages with my own phone, making sure to capture the timestamps and phone numbers. Evidence. I'd need evidence for what was coming next. Ellie, I need you to do something for me. Text Grandma and Grandpa, my parents, not Mom's, and ask them to come pick you up at the cabin tonight. Tell them it's a surprise visit. Can you do that? She nodded, still sniffling. Are you and Mom getting divorced? I don't know yet, sweetheart, but whatever happens, you're going to be okay, I promise. We bought some snacks and coffee, and I forced myself to act normal as we walked back to the car. Vicky barely looked up from her phone as we got in. Everything okay? She asked absently. Perfect, I said, starting the engine. Just perfect. The rest of the drive passed in a blur of forced conversation and dark thoughts. Vicky kept checking her phone and smiling at messages I now knew weren't from her girlfriends. Every laugh felt like a knife between my ribs. The cabin sat on the shore of Lake Champlain, surrounded by towering pines, and the kind of isolation that made horror movies possible. Vicky's parents had bought it in the 70s, back when lakefront property was affordable and cell towers were science fiction. As we pulled into the gravel driveway, I noticed fresh tire tracks in the dirt. Recent tracks, big enough for a BMW 7 Series. Looks like someone's been up here recently, I said casually. Vicky's face went pale for just a second. Probably Dad checking on the place. You know how he worries about break-ins? Right. Her father, who lived in Florida and hadn't been north of the Mason-Dixon line in 3 years. We unloaded the car in tense silence. The cabin looked the same as always. Rustic logs, green shutters, a wraparound porch that had seen better decades. But something felt wrong. The kind of wrong that makes your skin crawl and your instincts scream. Inside, Vicky immediately disappeared into the kitchen, claiming she needed to check if the refrigerator was working. I could hear her whispering into her phone, probably warning her lover that I was acting suspicious. Ellie tugged on my sleeve. Dad, Grandma texted back. She and Grandpa are driving up tonight. They'll be here around 8. Good girl. I ruffled her hair and tried to smile. Why don't you go pick out a movie for us to watch? As Ellie headed toward the living room, I crept closer to the kitchen. Vicky was still on the phone, her voice low and urgent. I don't know. He seems different. Quiet. Maybe we should wait until tomorrow. No, I can't just leave now. That would be too obvious. Fine, but be careful. If he sees you... A car door slammed outside. My wife's face went white as she ended the call. Evan, did you hear something? Just the wind, I lied, moving to the window. Through the trees, I could see the distinctive shape of Trent's BMW parked about 100 yards down the dirt road. The coward was actually here, probably planning to play the knight in shining armor when Vicky served me the papers. But I had news for both of them. This anniversary was about to become unforgettable. The next few hours were a masterclass in acting. I grilled burgers on the deck, played board games with Ellie, and made small talk with my cheating wife while my mind worked overtime planning their destruction. Vicky kept checking her phone and jumping at every sound from the woods. Around 7:30, I excused myself to use the bathroom, but slipped out the back door instead. Time for a little reconnaissance. Trent's BMW was still parked down the road, hidden behind a cluster of birch trees. The arrogant fool had even brought an overnight bag. I crept closer, staying in the shadows, until I could see him sitting in the driver's seat, scrolling through his phone. Trent McAllister, 43 years old, Harvard MBA, and the biggest mistake I'd ever made in hiring. I'd brought him in 2 years ago to handle the business side while I focused on the actual construction work. He was smooth, charming, and apparently irresistible to wives who'd grown bored with their blue-collar husbands. Well, let's see how charming he felt after this. I had my keys with me, old habits from growing up in a rough neighborhood. It took me about 30 seconds to key a deep scratch along the entire length of his pristine black paint job. Another minute to let the air out of all 4 tires. And for the grand finale, I grabbed the dead fish I'd spotted by the lake earlier, a nice, ripe bass that had seen better days, and wedged it deep into his air conditioning intake. Enjoy that smell, you piece of crap. I was back inside before anyone noticed I was gone. Vicky was pacing the living room, clearly agitated about something. Where were you? She asked sharply. Bathroom. Why? I thought I heard something outside. Probably just a raccoon. You know how they get into the garbage. At exactly 8 o'clock, my parents' headlights swept across the cabin windows. Vicky looked confused as car doors slammed and familiar voices called out greetings. What are they doing here? She whispered. Ellie invited them. Sweet, right? A real family reunion? My father, Joe Parker Sr., was a retired state trooper with the kind of presence that made guilty people confess to crimes they'd never committed. My mother, Rose, had taught 3rd grade for 30 years and could spot a lie from orbit. They were exactly the witnesses I needed for what came next. Surprise! Ellie shouted, running into their arms. Well, this is unexpected, Vicky said, her smile looking like it was held on with staples. We spent the next hour catching up, with my parents regaling us with stories from their recent cruise. Vicky kept checking her phone and glancing toward the windows. She was probably wondering why Trent wasn't answering her texts. Around 9:30, I suggested we all gather in the living room for a family video call with Vicky's parents in Florida. It'll be like old times, I said. Remember how we used to do those big family calls on holidays? Vicky's face went ashen. I don't think that's necessary. Oh, come on, my mother chimed in. It'll be wonderful. I haven't talked to Margaret and Robert in ages. I was already setting up my laptop, positioning it for the perfect angle. Ellie, why don't you go get Mom's special phone? The one in her purse? It might have better reception than mine. Evan, no! Vicky started, but Ellie was already running to get the device. Here, Dad. She handed me the secret phone, the one loaded with months of incriminating evidence. I pretended to fumble with the video call setup, But what I was really doing was connecting the phone to the laptop and preparing to share some very interesting content. Modern technology is wonderful when you know how to use it. Let's see. Okay, I think we're connected. Margaret, Robert, can you see us? Vicky's parents appeared on screen looking confused but pleased. They were old money Connecticut, the kind of people who still dress for dinner and considered my construction background slightly scandalous but tolerable. How lovely, Margaret cooed. Victoria, dear, you look tired. I'm fine, Mother, Vicky said through gritted teeth. Actually, I said, Victoria's been very busy lately, haven't you, honey? Lots of extracurricular activities. And then I did it. I shared the screen from the secret phone, displaying the text thread for everyone to see. Explicit messages, photos, detailed plans, everything laid out in high definition for both sets of parents and my daughter to witness. The silence was deafening. Margaret's face went white, then red, then purple. Robert started sputtering something about disgraceful behavior. My own parents sat in stunned silence, my father's cop instincts clearly kicking in as he processed what he was seeing. Vicky lunged for the laptop, but I was ready for her. Careful, honey. We wouldn't want to break anything. You fool, she screamed. You went through my private things. Actually, Ellie found your phone. Kids these days, so tech-savvy. Though I have to say, leaving explicit photos where a 9-year-old could find them, that's a new low, even for you. My daughter was staring at her mother with a mixture of confusion and disgust. She didn't understand everything she was seeing, but she understood enough. Victoria Elizabeth Morrison Parker. Margaret's voice cracked through the laptop speakers like a whip. What is the meaning of this? I can explain. With your husband's employee in our family cabin, have you lost your mind? Outside, I could hear Trent's car engine trying to turn over. Apparently, he discovered my little gifts. The engine wheezed and died. Wheezed and died. Then came the cursing. Sounds like your boyfriend's having car trouble, I said cheerfully. Vicky was crying now, ugly tears that ruined her carefully applied makeup. You don't understand. You're never home. You don't pay attention to me anymore. So, you decided to screw my CEO and plan to take half my company in the divorce? Yeah, I can see how that's my fault. My father cleared his throat. Son, maybe we should take Ellie outside. No, I said firmly. She deserves to know who her mother really is. Through the laptop screen, I could see Margaret whispering furiously to Robert. Their faces were masks of disgust and shame. In their world, image was everything, and Vicky had just destroyed theirs along with her own. We're cutting you off, Margaret announced suddenly. The trust fund, the credit cards, everything. Robert, call the lawyers first thing Monday morning. Mother, please. You've made your choice, Victoria. Live with it. The screen went dark as they ended the call. My parents gathered Ellie and quietly left for their hotel, my father squeezing my shoulder on the way out. Call if you need anything, son, anything at all. When we were alone, Vicky turned on me with fury I'd never seen before. You've ruined everything. My family, my reputation. You ruined it the moment you started screwing Trent. I just made sure everyone knew about it. Outside, Trent was shouting my name, demanding I come out and face him like a man. His car had finally started, but from the sound of it, he wasn't going far. This isn't over, Vicky snarled. I'll take you for everything you're worth. Good luck with that. See, while you were busy planning my humiliation, I was planning yours. And honey, I'm just getting started. The sound of Trent's BMW limping away into the night was music to my ears. But the real symphony was just beginning. Monday morning came with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything seem possible. I'd spent Sunday night at my parents' hotel, helping Ellie process what she'd witnessed and making some very important phone calls. The first was to Joe Mancini, my lawyer and oldest friend. The second was to Rita Gonzalez, my right hand at Parker Construction and the most loyal person I knew. By the time I walked into my office at 8 a.m., the wheels were already in motion. Boss, Rita said, appearing at my elbow with coffee and a grim smile. We need to talk. Rita was 45, tough as nails, and had worked construction since she was 18. She'd started as my secretary when I was just a two-man operation, and had evolved into my operations manager, chief problem solver, and unofficial company enforcer. If Rita was in your corner, you were golden. If she was against you, God help you. Tell me, I said, settling behind my desk. Trent's been busy. Came in at 6 this morning, probably thinking he could get ahead of whatever happened at the cabin. He's been shredding documents and deleting files from his computer. What kind of files? The kind that show he's been skimming money from the Riverside project. Nothing huge, just enough to fund his fancy lifestyle. Designer suits, expensive dinners, that BMW lease. I felt a cold smile spread across my face. How much? About $40,000 over 6 months, all buried in inflated vendor costs and phantom overtime charges. Perfect. Adultery was messy and emotional, but embezzlement? That was clean, criminal, and career-ending. Where is he now? Conference room, setting up for the 9 o'clock staff meeting. He doesn't know that I know about the money, and he definitely doesn't know about the cabin. Good. Let's keep it that way for now. At exactly 9 a.m., I walked into the conference room where my senior staff was gathered. 12 people who'd helped me build Parker Construction from nothing into one of the most successful firms in the region. They deserved to know what kind of snake they'd been working with. Trent was at the head of the table, looking perfectly composed in his $1,000 suit. His only tell was a slight tightness around his eyes and the faint smell of air freshener that wasn't quite covering something else. Something fishy. "Good morning, everyone," I said, taking my usual seat. "Before we start with the project updates, I have some personnel news to share." Trent's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "As you all know, trust is the foundation of any successful business. Our clients trust us with their projects, their budgets, and their dreams. In return, we trust each other to act with integrity and honor." I pulled out a folder thick with documents, bank statements, invoices, and email printouts that Rita had compiled over the weekend. Unfortunately, it's come to my attention that someone in this room has violated that trust in the most serious way possible. The room was dead silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to hold its breath. "Trent," I said, turning to face him directly, "would you like to explain why the Riverside project shows $40,000 in costs that don't actually exist?" His face went white, then red, then back to white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really? Because I have invoices here from vendors who say they never did the work they were supposedly paid for. I have overtime records for employees who were actually on vacation. And I have bank records showing mysterious deposits into your personal account that coincidentally match these phantom expenses." I slid the documents across the table. Several of my foremen leaned forward to get a better look, their faces growing darker by the second. "This is ridiculous," Trent stammered. "Those are legitimate business expenses. Like the dinner at Le Bernardin in Manhattan? The one you claimed was a client meeting, but was actually a romantic evening with my wife?" The words hit the room like a physical blow. Rita's eyes went wide with satisfaction. Mike Torres, my head foreman, actually whistled low under his breath. "That's right," I continued, standing up now. "While Trent here was stealing from the company, he was also screwing my wife. Apparently, $40,000 is the going rate for a home-wrecking CEO these days." Trent shot to his feet. "You can't prove any of this." "Actually, I can." I pulled out my phone and connected it to the conference room's audio system. "Recognize this number, Trent? It's the one you've been texting my wife from." I played one of the voice messages he'd left on Vicky's secret phone. Not the explicit ones, but one where he clearly discussed using company funds to pay for their hotel rooms and dinners. The room erupted. Mike stood up, his face flushed with anger. "You piece of crap. We've been busting our asses while you've been stealing from us?" "Sit down, Mike," I said calmly. "We're going to handle this the right way." But Trent was already moving toward the door, probably realizing that his best bet was to run before things got worse. I was ready for that, too. "Security," I said into my phone. "Please escort Mr. McAllister from the building. He's no longer employed here." 2 guards appeared in the doorway, guys I'd hired specifically for situations like this. They were polite but firm as they flanked Trent. "This isn't over, Parker," Trent snarled. "I'll sue you for wrongful termination. Defamation. Good luck with that. Rita, would you please call Detective Morrison at the state police? I believe we have a case of embezzlement to report." The color drained from Trent's face. Criminal charges meant jail time, not just a civil lawsuit. "You're making a mistake," he said, but his voice had lost all its confidence. "The only mistake I made was trusting you with my business and my family. But don't worry, I'm about to fix both of those problems." As security escorted him out, I turned back to my staff. They were staring at me with a mixture of shock, respect, and anticipation. "Anyone else have anything they need to confess?" I asked. Silence. "Good. Rita, please arrange for a full audit of all accounts and projects. I want to make sure Trent was the only thief in the henhouse. Mike, I'm promoting you to interim project manager. Everyone else, we have work to do." As the meeting broke up, Rita lingered behind. Boss, there's something else you should know. Trent made some calls this morning before you got here. I think he was trying to line up support, maybe planning to take some of our clients with him. Which clients? The Riverside project, for starters, and possibly the new mall development. I felt my anger spike again. It wasn't enough for him to steal my money and my wife. He wanted to destroy my business, too. Get me a list of every client he contacted. And Rita, start making some calls of your own. I want everyone in this industry to know exactly what kind of man Trent McAllister is. She grinned. With pleasure, boss. By noon, the story was spreading through the construction community like wildfire. Rita had friends at every major firm in the region, and she wasn't shy about sharing details of Trent's crimes. By evening, it would be all over social media thanks to Lila, Vicky's former best friend, who'd apparently decided that loyalty wasn't worth protecting a cheater. My phone buzzed with a text from Joe Mancini. Divorce papers filed, asset freeze in motion. She's going to be very unhappy. I smiled and typed back, good. Unhappy is exactly what I'm going for. The war was just beginning, and I intended to win every battle. 3 days later, I was working late at the office when Rita poked her head in. Boss, you might want to see this. She handed me her phone, showing a Facebook post from one of our competitors. It was a professional headshot of Trent with the caption, "Pleased to welcome Trent McAllister as our new Vice President of Development. His experience and client relationships will be invaluable as we expand our operations." I felt my blood pressure spike. When was this posted? 20 minutes ago. But here's the interesting part. Look at the comments. I scrolled down and nearly laughed out loud. The comments section was a bloodbath. Rita's network had been busy, and every construction worker, project manager, and contractor in the region seemed to have something to say about Trent's experience. Didn't this guy just get fired for embezzlement? One comment read. My buddy works at Parker Construction, says this dude was stealing money and screwing the boss's wife, read another. Good luck with that hire, nice LOL. Within an hour, the post had been deleted, but screenshots were already circulating. Trent's new job was probably going to be very short-lived. I was about to head home when my phone rang. Unknown number. Evan Parker. You think you're pretty smart, don't you? Trent's voice was slurred with alcohol and rage. Smart enough to catch you stealing from me. Where are you calling from, Trent? Jail? You ruined my life, you blue-collar piece of crap. My job, my reputation, everything. You ruined your own life when you decided to stick your dick where it didn't belong. I just made sure everyone knew about it. This isn't over. I'm going to destroy you, Parker. Your company, your family, everything you care about. The line went dead. I sat back in my chair considering. Trent was drunk, desperate, and apparently stupid enough to make threats over the phone. That combination made him dangerous in the short term, but ultimately self-destructive. Still, I'd learned not to underestimate desperate men. I called Mike Torres. Hey, Mike, you busy tonight? Just watching TV with the wife. What's up, boss? Trent just called me, making threats. I'm thinking he might try something stupid. Want to take a ride with me? Mike chuckled. You thinking what I'm thinking? Probably. Meet me at the office in 20 minutes. Mike Torres was 52 years old, built like a brick crap house, and had grown up in the same rough neighborhood I did. He'd been my foreman for 8 years and my friend for longer. If things got physical, there was nobody I'd rather have watching my back. We took my pickup truck and started cruising the bars near Trent's apartment. It didn't take long to find his BMW, still bearing the scratches I'd given it, now parked crooked outside Murphy's Tavern, a dive bar that catered to guys drinking away their problems. There's our boy, Mike said, pointing through the grimy window. Trent was at the bar, gesturing wildly at anyone who'd listen, a row of empty shot glasses in front of him. Let's wait, I said. Drunk drivers don't get very far. Sure enough, 20 minutes later, Trent stumbled out of the bar and nearly fell trying to get his keys out. He managed to start the car on the third try and pulled out of the parking lot like he was driving through molasses. I followed at a distance, keeping my headlights off. Trent was weaving all over the road, clearly too drunk to notice he was being tailed. He turned onto Route 9, heading toward the industrial district where my company had several ongoing projects. Son of a bitch, I muttered. He's going to one of our job sites. Probably planning to vandalize something, Mike agreed. Good thing we followed him. Trent's car turned into the entrance of the Riverside development, the same project he'd been stealing from. It was a 50-acre site that would eventually house a shopping center and office complex, but right now it was just foundation work and heavy equipment. I parked at the entrance and eliminated the engine. Trent had driven deeper into the site, his headlights casting crazy shadows as he navigated between piles of construction materials. "What's the plan, boss?" Mike asked. "We're going to have a conversation, a very educational conversation." We got out and started walking toward Trent's car, staying in the shadows. The night air was cold and sharp, carrying the scent of concrete dust and diesel fuel. Our footsteps crunched on gravel and scattered debris. Trent had parked near a pile of steel reinforcement bars and was standing beside his car, swaying slightly. In his hand was something that looked like a crowbar. "Planning some late-night renovations, Trent?" I called out, stepping into his headlight beams. He spun around, nearly losing his balance. "Parker, I knew you'd follow me, you paranoid fool. Just making sure you don't do anything else stupid, like destroying property that doesn't belong to you. This should have been my project," he screamed, waving the crowbar. "I did all the planning, all the client management. You just signed the checks. I also caught you stealing from it. Funny how that works." Mike had circled around behind him, staying just out of sight. Trent was too drunk and too angry to notice. "You know what your problem is, Parker? You think you're better than everyone else because you got lucky. But you're just white trash with money. And you're a thief and a home wrecker with daddy issues. At least I earned my money." That pushed him over the edge. Trent raised the crowbar and charged at me, screaming incoherently. But drunk men move slowly, and I'd been expecting it. I sidestepped his clumsy swing and grabbed his wrist, twisting until he dropped the weapon. Then I drove my shoulder into his chest, sending him sprawling into the mud beside a half-finished foundation. "Stay down," I warned, but Trent was already struggling to get up, his expensive suit now filthy with construction dirt. "You can't do this to me," he sobbed. "I had a life, a career. You had a life built on lies and theft. Now you get to see what rock bottom looks like." Mike appeared behind him, holding a length of rope. "Boss, we could tie him up, leave him here for the morning crew to find. Might teach him some humility." It was tempting, but I had a better idea. "Trent, here's what's going to happen. You're going to get in your car and drive home. Tomorrow, you're going to call every client you contacted and tell them you lied about me and my company. You're going to apologize for wasting their time, and you're going to recommend they stick with Parker Construction." "Go to hell," he spat. I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Say that again, Trent. I want to make sure the police hear your exact words when I file the restraining order." His face went pale. A restraining order would make it almost impossible for him to find work in the construction industry. "You're also going to stay away from my wife, my daughter, and my business. If I see you anywhere near my family or my job sites, I'll have you arrested for stalking and maltreatment." "This is kidnapping," he said weakly. "This is a citizen's arrest for attempted vandalism and attack with a deadly weapon. Mike here is a witness, and I've got everything on video." I gestured toward his car. "Now get out of here before I change my mind about being reasonable." Trent struggled to his feet, his suit ruined and his dignity in tatters. He looked like a scarecrow that had been left out in a hurricane. "This isn't over," he muttered, but there was no fight left in his voice. "Yeah, it is," I said. "You just don't know it yet." We watched him drive away, his taillights disappearing into the darkness. Mike clapped me on the shoulder. "Think he'll actually make those calls?" he asked. "Probably not, but that's okay. I've got other plans for Mr. McAllister." The real fun was just beginning. The annual Riverside County Charity Gala was the social event of the season. 500 of the area's most influential people gathered in the ballroom of the Grand Lake Hotel to raise money for local causes and see who was sleeping with whom. I'd been attending for years, usually as Vicky's reluctant escort, watching her work the room like a politician running for office. This year, I was going alone, and I had a very special presentation planned. Joe Mancini met me in the hotel lobby, looking sharp in his tuxedo and carrying a leather briefcase that contained the fruits of a week's worth of investigation. "You sure about this, Evan?" he asked as we walked toward the ballroom. "Once you pull this trigger, there's no going back." "I've been sure since the moment I saw those text messages. Vicky and Trent want to play hardball? Let's play." The ballroom was already packed with the usual crowd. Real estate developers, politicians, society wives, and enough old money to buy a small country. I spotted several of my clients, along with competitors who'd been circling like vultures since news of my divorce proceedings became public. And there, near the bar, was Vicky. She looked stunning in a black evening gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. Her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless, and she was surrounded by a small group of women who hung on her every word, playing the victim, no doubt. The poor, neglected wife whose cruel husband had thrown her out for no reason. Trent was there too, lurking near the silent auction tables and trying to look like he belonged. His new employers had apparently decided not to fire him immediately, probably hoping the scandal would blow over. They were about to be very disappointed. I made my way through the crowd, shaking hands and making small talk, slowly working toward the front of the room where the evening's speakers would make their presentations. As one of the event's major sponsors, I was scheduled to give a brief speech about the importance of community investment, but I had a different kind of investment in mind tonight. At exactly 9 p.m., the Master of Ceremonies called for attention. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome one of our most generous supporters, the founder and CEO of Parker Construction, Evan Parker. Applause filled the room as I walked to the podium. I could see Vicky's face in the crowd, her expression shifting from surprise to worry as she realized I was actually going through with this. Thank you, I said, adjusting the microphone. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces here tonight, all gathered for such a worthy cause. I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the room. Several people were already checking their phones, probably hoping for a brief, boring speech so they could get back to drinking and gossiping. You know, when I started Parker Construction 15 years ago, I believed that success was built on 3 things: hard work, integrity, and trust. I thought that if you treated people fairly and kept your word, you could build something that would last. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. This was exactly the kind of feel-good message they expected. But I've learned something important recently. I've learned that not everyone shares those values. Some people see trust as weakness. They see integrity as something to be exploited. The mood in the room began to shift. People were paying attention now, sensing that this wasn't going to be a typical charity speech. Some people will smile to your face while they steal from your company. They'll sit at your dinner table while they plan to destroy your family. They'll stand in your office and lie to your employees while they embezzle money to fund their secret affairs. Vicky's face had gone white. Trent was edging toward the exit, but Joe Mancini was positioned near the door, blocking his escape route. Now, I could keep these discoveries private. I could handle this quietly, through lawyers and accountants and private investigators. But I think this community deserves to know what kind of people they're dealing with. I nodded toward the back of the room, where Rita was operating a laptop connected to the hotel's audio-visual system. Suddenly, the large screens around the ballroom lit up with bank statements, email records, and text message screenshots. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the true character of Trent McAllister and Victoria Parker. The room erupted in gasps and shocked whispers as the evidence played out in high definition. Financial records showing the embezzlement, hotel receipts charged to company accounts, and yes, some of the more damning text messages between my wife and my former CEO. $40,000, I continued, my voice carrying clearly over the chaos. That's how much Trent stole from my company to fund his affair with my wife. Money that should have gone to employee bonuses, to safety equipment, to the very community projects we're supposed to be supporting tonight. Trent was pushing through the crowd now, desperate to escape, but several of my employees were in attendance, and they weren't inclined to let him pass. Mike Torres stepped into his path, arms crossed, looking like a bouncer at a very exclusive club. And Victoria, I said, turning to look directly at my wife, the woman I trusted with my heart, my home, and my daughter's future. Who repaid that trust by planning to take half of everything I've built while screwing the man I hired to help grow the business? Vicky was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks as the crowd stared at her with a mixture of disgust and fascination. Her circle of female supporters had melted away, leaving her standing alone in her expensive dress. But here's the thing about trust, I continued. Once it's broken, it can never be fully repaired. And when someone betrays you this completely, this publicly, they deserve to face the consequences just as publicly. I pulled out my phone and played an audio recording that made the room go completely silent. It was Vicky and Trent, recorded just 2 days ago, discussing their plan to claim I had been physically abusive during the marriage. That's right, I said, as the recording ended. Not content with adultery and embezzlement, they were planning to destroy my reputation with false accusations of domestic violence. They wanted to make sure I lost everything. My business, my daughter, my freedom. The crowd was stunned into silence. Even in a room full of people accustomed to scandal and gossip, this was beyond the pale. Fortunately, I continued, I have friends who know the truth. I have employees who've worked with me for years. I have clients who trust me. And I have a daughter who was brave enough to expose her mother's lies. That last part wasn't entirely true. Ellie didn't know about the domestic violence plan, but the crowd didn't need to know that. So here's what's going to happen. Trent McAllister will be facing criminal charges for embezzlement. He's already been fired from his new position. Yes, I called his employers this afternoon. And he'll be lucky if he finds work managing a hot dog stand after tonight. I could see Trent near the back of the room, his face red with humiliation and rage. Security guards were moving toward him, probably at the hotel management's request. As for Victoria, she'll be getting exactly what she deserves in our divorce proceedings, which is to say, nothing. Thanks to her adultery and her participation in Trent's embezzlement scheme, she's forfeited any claim to my assets. That wasn't entirely accurate either. Divorce law was more complicated than that, but the crowd didn't need to know the details. I want to thank you all for listening tonight. And I want to remind you that in business, as in life, character matters. Trust matters. And when someone shows you who they really are, you should believe them. I stepped away from the podium to thunderous applause. Not the polite charity gala applause I'd expected, but genuine appreciation from people who'd just witnessed the social execution of two very deserving targets. As I walked through the crowd, people shook my hand and patted my back. Several clients made a point of telling me they'd never believe the rumors about my company. Competitors who'd been hoping to pick up my account suddenly looked worried about their own reputations. But the best part was watching Vicky and Trent's complete social destruction play out in real time. Former friends turned away from them. Business associates pretended not to see them. Within minutes, they'd gone from being part of the inner circle to being pariahs that nobody wanted to associate with. Justice had never tasted so sweet. 2 weeks after the gala, I was in my office reviewing the latest project reports when Rita knocked on my door. "Boss, you need to see this." She handed me her phone showing a news article from the local paper. Former CEO sentenced to 2 years for embezzlement. Below it was Trent's mugshot, looking haggard and defeated. He took a plea deal, Rita explained. Apparently, his lawyer convinced him that going to trial would just make things worse. I felt a grim satisfaction reading the details. 2 years in minimum security prison, full restitution to Parker Construction, and 5 years of probation. His career in the construction industry was over, his reputation destroyed, and his future reduced to whatever jobs were available to convicted felons. "What about the wife?" Rita asked. Divorce was finalized yesterday. She gets supervised visitation with Ellie, no alimony, and she had to sign a non-disclosure agreement about the business. Supervised visitation? Judge wasn't impressed with her parenting skills. Apparently, leaving explicit materials where a 9-year-old could find them raises some concerns about judgment and child welfare. My phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. "Final paperwork, ready for pickup. Congratulations on your freedom." Freedom. It was an interesting word for what I'd achieved. Freedom from a lying wife, a stealing employee, and a marriage that had been built on false pretenses. But it had come at a cost. Months of legal battles, public humiliation for everyone involved, and a daughter who'd had to watch her family implode in the most public way possible. Still, I regretted nothing. That evening, I was at home with Ellie, helping her with homework, when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see a familiar figure on my front porch. Vicky, looking nothing like the polished socialite she'd once been. Her hair was unkempt, her clothes were wrinkled, and she had the desperate look of someone who'd run out of options. Behind her was a beat-up Honda Civic that had seen better decades. "Stay inside, sweetheart," I told Ellie, then opened the door, but didn't invite her in. "Evan, please, we need to talk." I think we've said everything we need to say. In court, in front of 500 people at the gala, in the newspapers. I made mistakes. You made choices. There's a difference. She was crying now. The kind of desperate tears that came from realizing you'd destroyed your own life. I lost everything. My parents won't speak to me. My friends won't return my calls. I can't find a job. Consequences have a way of catching up with people. I'm living in a studio apartment above a pizza place, Evan. I'm working as a waitress at a truck stop. This isn't who I am. No, this is exactly who you are. You're just seeing it clearly for the first time. Behind her, I could see neighbors starting to gather on their porches and driveways. Word would spread quickly that Victoria Parker was back in the neighborhood, begging her ex-husband for mercy. "Please," she whispered. "I just want to see Ellie, just for a few minutes." "You can see her during your scheduled visitation, with a court-appointed supervisor present. She's my daughter, too. She's the daughter you were willing to traumatize with your lies and schemes, the daughter you exposed to adult materials because you were too careless to hide your affair properly, the daughter you were going to use as a weapon against me with false misuse allegations." Vicky's face crumpled. She knew I had recordings of those conversations, evidence that would ensure she never got unsupervised access to Ellie again. "I was angry," she said weakly. "I wasn't thinking clearly." "You were thinking very clearly. You and Trent had it all planned out. The affair, the embezzlement, the divorce strategy, even the false accusations. The only thing you didn't plan for was getting caught." A car pulled up behind her Honda, a BMW that looked familiar. My blood pressure spiked as Trent got out, wearing an orange jumpsuit and ankle monitor. Apparently, he'd been released pending his sentencing. "Well, well," I said, stepping out onto the porch. "The gang's all here." "We just want to talk, Parker," Trent said, but he stayed by his car. Smart man. "About what? Your appeal? Your restitution payments? Or are you here to make more threats?" "We want to make a deal." I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "You want to make a deal. The thief and the cheater want to negotiate with the man they tried to destroy." "We have information," Vicky said desperately, "about some of your competitors. Things that could help your business. I don't need help from criminals and liars. My business is doing just fine without you." And it was true. The publicity from the gala and trial had actually helped Parker Construction. Clients liked the idea of working with a man who'd stood up to corruption and betrayal. We'd picked up 3 new major contracts in the past month. "Daddy?" Ellie's voice came from behind me. She'd been watching from the window, and her face showed a mixture of curiosity and disgust as she looked at her mother. "Go back inside, sweetheart. The adults are having a conversation. Is Mom in trouble again? Mom made some bad choices, and now she has to live with them, just like everyone else." Vicky's face twisted with pain at her daughter's casual dismissal. "Ellie, honey, I love you. I want you to know that everything you did was selfish and stupid," I interrupted. "Don't try to justify it to a 9-year-old. Trent stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "You self-righteous piece of crap. You think you're so much better than everyone else." "I'm better than thieves and homewreckers, yes. It's not a high bar. This isn't over," he snarled. "When I get out of prison, when this all blows over, when you get out of prison, you'll be a middle-aged convicted felon with no skills, no connections, and no future. This will never blow over, Trent. This is your life now." I could see the truth of that statement hitting him like a physical blow. The construction industry was small and unforgiving. Everyone would know his name and his crimes. He'd be lucky to find work as a day laborer. "And Vicky," I continued, "you'll always be the woman who destroyed her marriage for a man who wasn't worth it. Every potential employer will Google your name and find the news articles. Every man you meet will wonder if you'll cheat on him too. Every parent at Ellie's school will whisper about what kind of mother you really are." She was sobbing openly now, finally understanding the full scope of what she'd lost. "I want you both off my property," I said firmly. "And if I see either of you near my family again, I'll call the police." As they drove away, separately I noticed, their partnership apparently as dead as their reputations, I felt a sense of completion that I hadn't experienced since this whole nightmare began. I walked back inside where Ellie was waiting with a serious expression on her young face. "Dad, are you happy now that Mom and Mr. McAllister are gone?" I thought about that question carefully. Was I happy? Or was I just satisfied that justice had been served? "I'm happy that the truth came out," I said finally. "I'm happy that bad people faced consequences for their actions. And I'm happy that you and I can move forward without lies and betrayal in our lives." She nodded solemnly. "Good. I didn't like them very much anyway." That night, as I tucked Ellie into bed, she asked one more question. "Dad, will you ever get married again?" "Maybe someday, kiddo. But if I do, it'll be to someone who understands that trust and loyalty aren't just words. They're promises you keep no matter what. Promise me you'll pick someone better than Mom." "I promise, sweetheart, I promise." As I turned off her bedroom light and headed downstairs, I reflected on everything that had happened: the betrayal, the investigation, the public humiliation, the legal battles. All of it had led to this moment of peace in my own home with my daughter safe upstairs. Vicky and Trent had gotten exactly what they deserved. They'd chosen to betray trust, steal money, and destroy a family for their own selfish gratification. Now they were living with the consequences of those choices, and they would continue living with them for the rest of their lives. Some people might call what I did revenge. I preferred to think of it as justice served with a side of poetic irony. They'd tried to destroy me publicly, so I destroyed them publicly. They'd tried to steal my money and my family, so I'd taken away their reputations and their futures. Fair trade. I poured myself a glass of bourbon and sat on my back deck, looking out over the lake where this all began. The water was calm, reflecting the stars like scattered diamonds. Somewhere out there, Vicky was probably crying herself to sleep in her studio apartment, and Trent was counting down the days until his prison sentence began. But I was home, with my daughter safe upstairs and my business thriving, finally free from the people who'd tried to destroy everything I'd built. Sometimes the good guys really do win,